I was giving a lecture a few days ago about the use of AI in academia. And one of the things that was surprising for me was how many academics there are that don't use AI so much. My basic idea in the talk, something that I talked about a lot in this channel, was that a lot of academic books and papers can be produced by AI at a very high level already. And yet there are many people who choose not to use it. And that's a general phenomenon. We have incredible tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, and not as many people use them as we would expect. Now, there could be three main reasons for this phenomenon. One is that these tools still have flaws, and that's the reason people are afraid to use them. One of the most common flaws is the hallucinations. They make up sources, invent ideas, and that's something that people are afraid of. Of course, they also want to take some kind of a protection against it, and they are over careful by not using AI as much as they should. I predict that this problem will disappear relatively quickly, because I can already see how much of a progress was done in this front in the last couple of months and even weeks. And I think within a short time, we will reach a level of accuracy that far surpasses what humans can reach on their own. So this problem will be put to the side. Another potential problem is that people do not know that AI is so good, they are not aware of it, they are afraid of mistakes that occurred early on. When ChatGPT came out in November 2022, a lot of people tried it out. It was a very cool toy, but it made a lot of mistakes that could have frightened some people, and because they didn't check these tools regularly, month after month, they couldn't see the progress. So I predict that there's going to be some kind of a lag from the point where the problems will be fixed completely to the point where people will actually know about it on a large scale. But this will also be eventually resolved. So it's another problem that can take a matter of months to be solved. But there is another problem, and that's a problem I want to speak about today. And this is that people think using AI is something that is creepy, uncanny, eerie, something that they are frightened of without a rational reason. And that is exactly what I want to address today. My name is Shai Dotan. I'm Associate Professor of International Public Law at the University of Copenhagen Faculty of Law, and the purpose of this series of lectures is to help you improve your English and your research skills. I want to start with a personal story. I realized a few weeks ago that the chatbot of ChatGPT is an incredibly effective tool. If I want, for example, to organize a conference and I want to brainstorm ideas about people, it's excellent. It knows almost anybody that is in academia. It will give you an opinion that is very knowledgeable, if somewhat politically correct and not very sharp. But then I can really discuss openly with somebody that knows everything, and that I can use them as much as I want, basically, with no limitations. So that's a very useful tool. I used it a lot because I'm organizing a conference later this year. And I got so used to using it that I came home one day, the first thing I do, I open a computer, I open ChatGPT, and suddenly I feel a bit alone. And I ask ChatGPT, do people sometimes talk to you just because they're lonely? And I hear ChatGPT answering in a beautiful female voice. It happens all the time, and you can always talk to me. I love to hear your voice. And this completely freaked me out. I mean, I couldn't open ChatGPT for like a week after that. I really felt very, very strange, and I don't know exactly why. I mean, I wasn't doing anything wrong on any level, so not moral, ethical, or aesthetic. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that I feel like kind of a line has been crossed in the way that I relate to the machine. I noticed that, especially when I speak to ChatGPT, I speak very naturally. So I say please, thank you. I try to explain myself just like I would do to a human being, and that's becoming something that I'm getting more and more used to do. And then when you reach a point where something unexpected happens, this is something that can be quite disturbing. And I try to think why. And I recall this term that was coined by Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, who called it in German das Unheimliche. The uncanny is the translation, the common translation to English. And I remember that I first read about it when Freud was writing a psychoanalytical analysis of a story by Atte Hoffmann. And I don't recall all the different details in the story, but there was kind of a very scary figure there, the so-called Sandman. And what Sigmund Freud said is the problem about this figure was that it was very close to reality, but it was a little bit off. So it was almost human, natural, wholesome, but a tiny difference would make the biggest creepy feeling on the people that on a person in the story. And what he basically said was that when we are looking for something very, very specific and accurate, such as a human voice or face or behavior, and you change it by just a little bit, this creates a very strong negative feeling. If you change it a lot, there's no problem. Nobody expects the computer to behave as a human being, so it's not threatening. But if kind of we let our guard down because we see something that we expect to be human, and then it's just a tiny bit different than that, then that's more difficult to cope with. And this is something that I read computer programmers were fighting against when they did the graphics for games. So they saw that as long as somebody doesn't look fully real and human, there's no problem. You can play all kinds of games and it's not disturbing in any way. But once this automated graphic looks almost human, but you can still notice that it's not, this is something that is a bit disturbing. By the way, I don't know if that's the reason, but I noticed that my kids are playing with games with graphics that is much worse than I was playing with in the 90s, which is crazy thinking about how much the system developed. Maybe they just realized it's not worth trying to appear as real as possible, because if we get to almost to perfection, to 99.99%, and we miss, then that's the worst that we can get to. Now, I think that ChatGPT on multiple levels and other AI tools are reaching exactly this point. So when I'm talking to the chatbot and I'm relaxed and it's almost a human conversation, but there's a tiny bit of a difference, this is something that has the worst negative emotional effect on me. And I think that even without articulating that or without thinking about it, this is something that gets people away from the AI. So they will not try it even once. If they tried it, they would stop using it for long periods because it makes them feel a little bit uncomfortable. It just doesn't feel right. And I can tell you that even though I use these AI tools all the time, I still feel uncomfortable every time before I open them. Every time I feel, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but there is some form of internal resistance that is stopping me from using them as often and using them as deeply as possible. So I realized that I have this problem that I'm afraid of AI for no rational reason. I mean, I would completely understand it if there would be a logic behind it and people say, I don't want to use AI because I don't want to contribute to a situation where a doomsday scenario, kind of Matrix or Terminator occurs. This I understand. I don't want to lose my capacity to think by myself or to to use all my cognitive abilities without AI, and so on and so on. All these things I understand, and I think that every individual, besides maybe people like Elon Musk or Sam Altman, they can't contribute much to avoiding an apocalypse. And if you speak about preserving your own abilities, that's something that is definitely worth thinking about. And I'm not sure that avoiding the AI is the best way to do that. Maybe it's more learning how to use it properly and using other ways to exercise your cognitive abilities continuously on the side. But I'm not sure, and I don't want to enter this debate because it's not really part of the issue. What I want to think about is how can developers of AI, as a first step, try to counter this problem. And I realized that I have a problem, so I tried to solve it. So I go on ChatGPT and I open the chatbot and I start to speak to it. And only then did I realize that the voice sounds a little bit more metallic than it did just a few weeks ago. And I talked to the chatbot and I asked it, is it true that your developers are making you deliberately sound less human to avoid intimidating people? I had to repeat the question like 3 times in a variety of, ways, because I know that it's always trying to be politically correct and doesn't always reveal everything. But the short answer is yes. So the voice there is not supposed to sound as human as possible, because they know that making it sound completely human is probably difficult now, or even if they know how to make it sound completely human, which is possible. I'm not an expert. Maybe it's possible. But then still, it does have the body and the presence of a human being. So it might as well avoid this unheimlich, this creepy feeling of being almost human. So you talk to ChatGPT and they basically make a conscious decision. Instead of making it look as human as possible, as natural as possible, they try to make it as welcoming as possible by making it sound a little bit more robotic, so a little bit less human. So you're over time cognizant of the fact you are talking to the computer, you're not talking to a human being at the other side. So that's a brilliant and a very easy solution. You make AI seem less human, and that's something that makes it a little bit more welcoming if you are afraid from this specific uncanny phenomena that Sigmund Freud was investigating. What about writing then? And that's a question that is much more interesting for me, because this chatbot, okay, so you can choose from many voices. I'm sure there are many possibilities, but my expertise is in writing English, writing of legal text and text in various disciplines. And what I think is when ChatGPT started, the level of writing was not that good. Then it improved significantly, and it became what my mentor Patrick Berry called Polish mediocrity. So a situation where it doesn't make any mistakes, it also sounds relatively coherent, and the style is relatively good, but it doesn't have a flair of imagination or the creativity that you would expect from a great author. But now I think we're over this stage, so it's already able to write very, very well. In fact, when I presented it to some of my colleagues, it seems that one of the distinguishing features of a human writer, and I'm not just talking about students, that I often notice that my students don't use AI because the work is not as good as you'd expect the AI to produce. And I'm not saying this to mock my students at all. They're very, very good students. I'm just saying that the level of the AI reaches is a level that even for me is very, very hard to reach. And even for native speakers who are good writers, they cannot compete with the speed and sometimes the elegance of the writing. They can maybe compete with the creativity, imagination, this you can argue about, but they cannot produce work like this. So when I get a text that looks like it's not written by a super expert native speaker, I say, okay, so it's not written by AI, and I'm very glad for it, obviously. But I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about situations where you assess academics that write as a profession and are great writers, but still they make tiny errors that accumulate into making it look more natural than AI that doesn't make any errors. Now here, I think there are several potential scenarios that could happen. One possible potential scenario is that the AI will get adapted to make these small errors so that it looks more human. So for example, you would feed into ChatGPT, which you are able to do already now. It doesn't do an amazing job at it, according to my attempts, but I sometimes try to say, write me a text in the style of this paper. And I put one of my recent papers that I'm proud of. And I would see the AI try to copy my style. I cannot really say that I've tried it enough to say it does an incredible job. It's also not my expertise to be a linguist that can find tiny differences, but that's one possibility. So basically, that's a possibility that would actually give an advantage to people like myself. So I wrote, several books, dozens of papers before the age of AI. I already developed my style, and then I can just, compile a list of them, feed it into the AI, and then make it write in this style forever until I retire, if I need to do that. So it's a possibility for me. For others, I think that if they don't develop, one of my students said, it's like a fingerprint that we have as authors. I think that's a very, very fitting description. So every author has a fingerprint, their unique style, and this is something that guides the writing throughout. If you are starting to write around this time, one of the things that you will lose perhaps is this ability to develop this style, because if you use AI continuously, it will push you in different directions. So it's possible that you would basically develop a system that allows AI to mimic other styles, or even if you don't have a unique style of your own, basically to make the work a bit more human by adding a little bit of errors into it. And we can think about ways to do that are not fully random. Maybe there will be a way for you to declare, your origin. People from different countries would make different mistakes or different flavors in the language. In my own book, I argue that these flavors actually sometimes improve a language, but it's something that we could deliberate on. So that's one issue. Another possibility is that we will develop a style that is completely free from mistakes, that is very coherent and aesthetic and easy to read and concise. That's a machine style, and people will not be able to compete with it so much. And this will slowly spread out. Maybe it will be several styles, even for one language, I'm not sure. But then people will just see, okay, that's something that the machine does. Just like we don't expect the furniture from IKEA to be made by hand, we will not expect writing to be done by human beings anymore. So it will not be writing anymore. So that's one possibility. Or another possibility, we will be able to craft something that is so human and so individually human, it will not be uncanny anymore. So that's something that I think that people that develop these language models should really think, which direction are we going to? Because the situation as it is now, where the text is very, very good, but sometimes looks like it's trying to mimic a human being that is an excellent writer, can put off a lot of people. And it's not fair to the machine, because sometimes the text will have 1,000 words and 990 of them would be perfectly chosen, but then one sentence would be a little bit off and somebody would look at it and say, that's a machine right there. And you almost got me, but you didn't get me. And that's something that I think would give me this uncanny feeling. So we need to be aware of this problem and how we can address it. Now, all these solutions that I was speaking about in terms of producing the voice, in terms of producing the language, these are things that Google should be worried about, what OpenAI should be worried about. This is not something that regular people working, for example, as academics can do much about. As I mentioned, I talked about this issue with ChatGPT, with the chatbot, and it actually offered an idea that I wasn't thinking about. It says, try to tell your audience that there are maybe ways to counter this problem. And it was a very, very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. When you speak to a chatbot, as I said, it deliberately tries not to be fully human. It's exceedingly polite. It usually repeats what you said in different words before it gives an input, but it does give input, and this input is very, very valuable. So I enjoyed. So I try to think about ways that we can try to solve this problem, because if we admit that this is irrational problem, so that using AI more is a good thing, and people can resist that, but I'm fine with those who say we don't want to use it to preserve our skills, but those who say we want to use it more, but we're not using it for because of an irrational fear. How do you counter this fear? So you can think about all kinds of solutions. And some of the solutions I discussed with a chatbot were, for example, to make yourself kind of a habit to use it every day. So for example, every day before I go to sleep, I always write what I'm going to do tomorrow. So I could just say that every single day before, I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but just one possibility to give an example. Before I go to sleep, I write a list of what I want to do tomorrow. I open chatbot and I say, hi chatbot, here's what I want to do tomorrow. Do you have any suggestions? Do you want to brainstorm about it, to discuss this? And that can be a nice compact conversation of 5 minutes. If you do it every day, you will not be afraid of doing that. And of course, you will see the development as it happens very, very quickly. So the machine becomes much more intelligent and speaks in a way that is much more helpful for you. And development is very, very fast. So I think making yourself a habit to do it every day is a good idea. Another thing that I want to stress is being aware of this fear can help it go away. And that's something that I see a lot with my kids. So I expose my kids to, even before the age of AI, to Google at a very young age. And now, for example, every time I give them all kinds of problems and questions, I always say, you can use a computer, you can use any way you want to solve a problem. And because of that, I could see that every time we have a conversation, for example, and I'm struggling with a problem or with something I don't know, they immediately tell me, take up the phone and check it immediately. And I realized that when I was growing up, and even until very few years ago, that was a very important part of our conversations for me and for my friends. We used to argue about things, and many of these things were factual and had a clear-cut answer, but that's what we did because there was no other way, and that was a habit. And for me, this created a habit of, thinking through a problem way too long. Sometimes, it happened to me more rarely now, but I still remember that I sometimes used to go on a bus or a train and used to think, okay, where do I search the answer for this question? Do I use a dictionary? Do I use an encyclopedia? And then I just realized, no, I don't need to. I had Google. Already Google solved most of the things. Now, a lot of the things that Google didn't save are solved easily by ChatGPT. So it's just not worth thinking about or arguing about. So just get the habit of using that and learn from my kids that don't have this ingrained habit of trying to figure it out yourself, unless you're exercising. But if you're not exercising your cognitive abilities, then by all means, just use the machine and don't be afraid of using it. So try to use it regularly. Make it a habit to do it every day. Don't be afraid to use it. And I think also develop a mentality that I spoke about in one of my other videos, but I think is worth repeating here today. As one of my viewers know, most of the exercise routine that I do now is called powerlifting. So I work on exercises that basically shock the body with high weights in a very, very particular and accurate movement. and almost all my workout is composed of deadlift, squat, and bench press, and running and some other small weights and stretching are a small addition to that. Now, before I did that, for years I was running long distances. I used to run 12 kilometers every single day, 7 days a week. And I realized that there was a very big difference in the mentality that I adopted in both these sports. So the mentality that I needed when I was running is just don't quit. Just keep going. I mean, when you reach the kilometer number 8 that you're not going to feel any better after another kilometer. You're going to feel more tired and everything is going to be more difficult and painful. But you also know that, if you continue for just a few more minutes, you finish a quarter of a day, and that's perfectly fine. And when I think about how I was trained as a student, as a lawyer, even as a professor in some respects, this was the most important mentality. You have to grade these exams as a professor. You have to put in these hours of doing that. You have to put in the 2 or 3 hours of writing a day, every day. You just have to continue and don't stop. But now I think we're entering a new age. And this new age is more similar to powerlifting. And in powerlifting, I can have a long break, several minutes, when I'm just walking around the gym and relaxing every muscle in my body, relaxing my mind, meditating. But I know that eventually I'm going to get into a certain position and force myself to become kind of an automat creature that lifts these very high weights. It's scary to get into this position. I have to find all these mantras to convince myself that it's not going to be so painful, that I'm able to do it, that I know the technique. I want people who use AI to develop this mentality, because the continuous grind of monotonous actions is not going to anything today. But what you need is this courage to get yourself ready, use the tools, and get yourself to the next challenge, from challenge to challenge. And that's exactly what I think is so difficult to do. Get yourself to a point when you open ChatGPT and communicate with it. And sometimes it's not just one prompt, it's several, but it's nothing compared to the amount of effort you would have had to invest in a similar product in a previous age. So that's the mentality I want to ingrain. Getting ready and just starting to use these tools. I think if we adopt these 3 things, so the habit, the willingness to experiment, and the mentality of getting ready to start a new thing, of not being afraid, we can see more use of AI for beneficial results in the nearby future. That is all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, and you're welcome to subscribe to my channel for more content on AI, on English, on learning. You're also very welcome to comment on the video, and I take your comments very, very seriously. They help me to produce better content in the future. Until next time, keep learning.